So here's something that's been stuck in my head for a while. What's the deal with Bob Gray? We all know Pennywise, creepy clown, red balloon, sewer drain, standard Derry nightmare stuff. But if you've ever actually read it or paid close attention to the movie, there's this random moment where the name Robert Bob Gray pops up, and you're just like, wait, who? Does Pennywise have a real name? And why that name? It sounds like a dude who sells used cars or fixes your plumbing, but apparently there's more to it. It ties back to what it really is. Not just some evil clown, but an ancient, messed up thing from way beyond our universe that wears a human face to screw with people. So yeah, we want to talk about it. Where did this whole Bob Gray thing come from? Why would someone that old and powerful pick a name like that? And how did the book and the movies handle it? Because honestly, this is fascinating and it kind of gets buried under all the clown stuff. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
You haven't changed anything yet.
When you first watch it, you're too busy yelling at Georgie to back away from the sewer to let your mind wander off and think, what's that thing with the balloon? Pennywise suddenly shows up in the drain, his yellow eyes glowing in the dark, and grins like your worst memory of a birthday party clown. And suddenly, you have forgotten to ask where did he come from, or why does this creature keep dragging kids into storm drains? When Pennywise first introduced himself in Stephen King's It, he didn't open with a joke or a balloon trick, he blurts out Bob Gray. And while the clown shtick gets all the attention, it's this low-key alias that quietly feels the most off. A generic, boring name that wouldn't make people look twice. Think about it. If you're someone who's trying to snatch kids unnoticed, would you go around introducing yourself as It, Devourer of Souls? Nah, you'd probably call yourself something dull, something like Bob. But behind that boring name is a monster that can become whatever scares you the most. Stephen King drops this detail right in the middle of one of the book's earliest and most terrifying moments when Georgie meets Pennywise in the storm drain. King never really explains where Bob Gray came from, which makes it even better. The mystery remains. You start to wonder, is Bob Gray a real person it devoured and then copied? Was there once a guy who walked into Derry and then never walked out? What if there really was a Bob Gray, some regular guy, maybe a drifter or a loner, someone no one would miss, someone easy to erase, who stumbled into Derry and got eaten, swallowed up body and soul, that it absorbed some poor soul, stole his face, his name, and wore it like a disguise? That would make Bob Gray the first human it ever mimicked. Or maybe it invented Bob Gray from scratch, cooked up the blandest human idea it could think of to slip into our heads. Bob Gray might be the first human form it ever took after coming to Earth. Maybe even before the clown, because the clown draws eyes, but Bob Gray blends into the crowd. He could have walked into a town meeting or knocked on your door and you wouldn't bat an eye. That's the genius of it. That's what makes it such a good disguise. Either way, it works. Pennywise gets remembered, Bob Gray gets overlooked, and that's exactly the purpose.
You're a weak old woman.
Bob Gray and Pennywise. Different faces, same monster? So are Bob Gray and Pennywise two separate things? No way, same beast. While Pennywise was a clown suit and teeth, Bob Gray was its first proper mask long before the makeup, before the balloon tricks, before the deadlights started frying kids' brains. Pennywise works best on kids because they're easier to terrify. Fear makes the flesh taste better. In It, Pennywise is one of dozens of shapes it morphs into. Lepers, werewolves, mummies, giant birds, whatever scares the target the most. He scares you silly, feeds on your fear, and then moves on. Pennywise is perfect for that because clowns already give people the creeps. Who could possibly see a clown and find it amusing? Certainly not us. Still gives us the jitters. Pennywise dances, smiles, and jokes. He's loud, but unlike Pennywise, Bob Gray walks around unnoticed, sits at diners, tips his hat, says hello. But under all that shapeshifting, it's still the same monster. Doesn't matter if it wears clown paint or a tie, what's behind both is something way older than Derry, way older than Earth even. So yeah, Bob Gray and Pennywise are just different sides of the same ugly coin. It picks whatever form gets the job done, loud or quiet, funny or creepy. Either way, it's still that ancient parasite hiding behind a smile.
Showed me the way it appeared to them.
It, more than a monster. It was never meant to be here. Not on Earth, not in our reality. The thing we call Pennywise, or Bob Gray, is just a piece of something way older drifting in a place called the Macroverse. That's where it comes from, a shape-shifting, reality-bending force known as the Deadlights, and it's not alone. There's also Maturin, a cosmic turtle that literally threw up our universe. One creates while the other consumes. When it crossed over into our world, it didn't see us as people. We're flickers to it, like bugs under a lamp. And while it lurks in sewers, that's not where it exists. Its real form is those deadlights, pure alien energy that'll break your mind if you look too long. Ever wonder why adults in Derry never notice the blood, the balloons, or the kids vanishing? That's it messing with reality, making people forget, look away, pretend nothing's wrong. It doesn't haunt places, it infects them. The clown, the man named Bob Gray, those are just disguises, human shapes, so it can hunt without setting off alarms, because you can't fight what you don't understand, and it makes sure you never will. When Bob Gray came to town, long before the clowns, before the red balloons, before people and language, before Derry was even Derry, it had already landed. It traveled between dimensions and crashed to Earth as a fiery meteor in prehistoric times, way back when the land was still wild and untouched. This was way before any settlers showed up. It hit the ground like a parasite looking for a home, and over millions of years, it dug in deep beneath what would one day become Derry, Maine. But there was nothing worth feeding on yet. Dinosaurs don't feel guilt. Cavemen don't fear clowns. That meant it had to wait. Wait for people to start building towns, wait for them to invent superstitions, stories, nightmares, because humans give you the good stuff. Terror, shame, trauma, pain, real gourmet emotions. In 1715, ice melted, trees grew back, and people finally showed up and built a town over its resting place. That's when it woke up, hungry and ready to play, not fully at first, just enough to test the waters. It didn't start out as a clown. Pennywise came later, but Bob Gray, that might have been its first real identity that he took right after waking. The novel says the earliest traceable event is the slaughter of the Derry settlers in 1741. A full colony of 340 settlers who showed up from Ireland, eager to start fresh along the Kentuskeg River. They built homes, tried building a future, but it didn't last. Everyone disappeared without a trace. That's the kind of thing it loves. Mass panic, vanishing acts, and the town covering it up. Whether Bob Gray was part of that exact moment can't be confirmed, but it's around this time that it starts leaving human fingerprints behind. Soon, the cycle began. Wake up, hunt, feed, disappear. The settlement got abandoned. A few years later, people came back. New settlers, new town layout. Derry was reborn, and that's when it really started experimenting. In the late 1700s, it played around with disguises, shapes that pulled people in. One of the earliest was a weird juggler near the canal. A photo in an old album shows him juggling pins. The clown idea was already forming. 1851 marked another hit. John Markson poisoned his whole family and then killed himself with white nightshade. Tragic, yes, but locals later figured out he had been possessed. People who see the deadlights straight on either go mad, fall under their control, or drop dead. Markson probably saw something no human should. By 1877, Derry had boomed into a lumber town. Business was good, people felt safe, but that wouldn't last. A group of lumberjacks walked into the woods and found another group torn up like bear food. Nobody could explain it. Another 27-year cycle had hit. In 1904, Derry had a big ribbon-cutting event for the Kitchener Iron Works. A full crowd showed up to cheer the opening, though in a picture, off to the side, we see a weird figure in a photo. Looks like a man in a clown getup, hands raised in celebration. A year later, the place exploded and killed 108 people. 88 of them were kids at an Easter egg hunt. Nobody knew why the boilers blew. Witnesses blamed poor engineering, but a few locals noticed odd things. Red balloons, a clown in the smoke, the dots were there. It was there, feeding every 27 years. It came back up like clockwork. Kids vanished, blood ran in the sewers, then it went quiet again. But in most of those older records, there's no mention of Bob Gray. That silence might be intentional. If Bob Gray existed, he didn't want to be remembered. After the ironworks disaster in 1906, Derry moved on. That's what the town does. It forgets. Right after the Easter explosion, a wave of animal mutilations showed up. Cats, dogs, birds, all torn to shreds. People shrugged it off, chalked it up to wild animals, but the timing felt off. In 1908, tensions in Derry boiled over. A union organizer, Claude Kilgore, stirred things up. He and 3 of his fellow workers checked into a local hotel while pushing for better conditions. They never checked out. All 3 turned up in the Kenduskeg River, limbs missing, the word union plastered across their chests. Nobody ever proved if it did it or not, but it all felt too familiar. Then Kilgore snapped, took an axe to a bar and thought he found the men behind it. Locals turned on him fast and lynched him in the street. One man claimed he saw someone doing flips nearby. He assumed it was a drunk. In 1931, Derry flooded bad. One of the worst floods in the town's history. Water ripped through streets, homes, everything. The sewer system buckled. Some blamed poor infrastructure, but if you're paying attention, you'll notice something. This was around the time the big drains, runoff tunnels, and underground chambers were rebuilt. They didn't know it, but Derry was building it a kingdom under the streets, and that's where Pennywise really made itself at home. After the flood, Derry felt quiet, but not that peaceful kind of quiet. The town had that weird hush. The town kept things low-key during the 30s and 40s, but it never stopped watching. In 1933, folks gathered for a big bash at Wally's Spa. Booze was back on the shelves after Prohibition ended and everyone was celebrating. There's a group photo from that day. Men raising their mugs and laughing, but in the corner, there's a weird detail most people miss. Pennywise tipping back champagne. This is the stretch where Pennywise stopped hiding. It wasn't snatching kids every day, but it stayed present, and when it felt like folks were getting too comfortable, it reminded them who ran the town. The year was 1957. Rain poured. Bill Denbrough made a paper boat for his little brother Georgie. You know the story. The boat shot down the gutter and Georgie chased after it. It slid into a storm drain. And that's when he met a man who called himself Bob Gray, wore a clown suit, yellow eyes, sharp teeth. Georgie never made it home. That's when the feeding cycle began. By July 1958, the Losers Club, Bill, Beverly, Ben, Mike, Eddie, Richie, and Stan all saw it. They all felt something wrong under Derry, and they knew the adults wouldn't fix it. Each of them had a run-in. Stan saw drowned kids whispering his name. Eddie kept running into that diseased leper. Beverly heard voices coming up from her sink and got sprayed with blood no one else could see. Mike saw a giant bird try to snatch him near the ironworks ruins. Same bird his dad saw years earlier. Richie got stalked by a werewolf. But now the Losers Club was tired of running. The tipping point came with the photo album. Georgie's school photo moved. Blood poured from the pages. The book burned Bill's hands. That was the moment they knew it wasn't just haunting them, it was hunting them. So, well, it's been around for ages. You don't find old photos of Bob Gray. You don't hear stories. That's what makes Bob Gray so weird when it finally appears in the novel. It feels like something familiar, but no one knows why. It adds to the mystery. Was Bob Gray hiding behind every disaster in Derry's history, quietly watching while the clowns set the trap? Either way, the Bob Gray identity lines up with when it began to evolve past primal fear and started tapping into social patterns like guilt, cruelty, and loneliness. It's when the monster stopped being a thing in the dirt and started pretending to be one of us, and maybe the most dangerous face it ever wore because no one saw it coming. TV, film, and the human shape of evil. If you only know Pennywise from the screen, you might think the clown is the main face of the monster. However, in the 1990 miniseries, Tim Curry nails the whole killer clown vibe, but Bob Gray never gets a mention, which feels strange considering it's the first time Pennywise uses Bob Gray in the book. And yet, on screen, that name barely makes a peep. Maybe because it was too obscure for TV, or maybe it hit too close to home, too human, too casual. Because, let's face it, Bob Gray doesn't send chills down your spine. It sounds like a random dude at your door trying to sell you vacuums. Either way, that part of the lore never made it in. Now, jump to the Muschietti films from 2017 and 2019, and the name finally sneaks in. You never hear it out loud, but it shows up if you're paying attention. Old newspaper clippings, missing persons flyers, graffiti on bathroom walls, Easter eggs. There's even a scene where Robert Gray is printed on an old carnival sign. It's not in your face and often gets overlooked, but that feels on purpose because the filmmakers wanted to keep it quiet. Let it sit in the back of your mind and let it rot there. Some fans think that's exactly why Bill Skarsgård's version comes closer to the Bob Gray idea than Curry's ever was. Less loud, more alien. The way he just stares, the way he doesn't blink like a person, eyes drifting in different directions. By not having characters say Bob Gray out loud, the films do something smart. They keep the identity buried. Because once you speak it, you give it shape, you acknowledge it. And maybe the point of Bob Gray is that you're not supposed to. The adaptations don't erase him, but they do keep him in the corner.
Oh, did it work, Mikey?
You saw the clown, you missed the monster. Pennywise comes at you with a warning label. Red balloons, a clown suit, a grin that's way too wide, and you know you're in trouble. The second you see him, your brain goes, danger. He is horror dressed like Halloween, meant to freak out kids who still check under their beds, and he does a damn good job of it. But at least you get a warning. That said, Bob Gray doesn't come with a warning label. He casually slides right past them. He's the shape it wears when it wants to be close, when it wants to watch. In other words, where Pennywise shocks you, Bob Gray follows you. And once you start to understand Bob Gray, you start seeing what it really is. This thing doesn't feed for fun, it feeds with purpose. Bob Gray is the purest form of manipulation. It shows the scope, shows that it doesn't just scare, it also studies, learns, and adapts. And the closer it looks to us, the easier it is for it to pull you into the sewer. Marvelous verdict! Bob Gray was a name I used to brush off like it was nothing. We figured it was just some alias King used to make things feel a bit more old school, but the more we sat with it, the more it started to bug us. Why would a creature that old, that powerful, go by Bob Gray of all things? And why hide behind it before even becoming Pennywise? Now it makes sense, because Bob Gray isn't an alias, it's the real mask. Because while the clown gets all the attention, it's Bob Gray who sneaks into the background, watches you from the crowd, and smiles like everything's fine. If something like it can wear a name like Bob Gray and pass for human, then maybe the real horror isn't in the sewers, it's in how easily we ignore the ordinary. Pennywise might be the icon, the clown in the costume, but remember who came first, Bob Gray, and that's who we're going to be watching out for. That's all we got for you this time, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.